All right, good day to everybody. This is Roski Maskani. I got Brother Iweze on the line, and he's just listening in right now because he's busy doing something else, but he wanted to listen to this interview that I'm going to do with one of my real good buddies that I talk to all the time. He's like family, just like everybody else that I associate with. And this is Brother Iweze. Brother Iweze is an author, a teacher, a roots reggae fan, and a world traveler. That's what I know about the brother. Brother Iweze, how you doing today?
Doing good. Blessed of the Most High. How you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I get to talk to you, so that's always good. Yeah, man. Let me start asking you some questions, brother. Now tell me this.
Okay.
What inspired you to become an educator and an author?
Well, I come from a background of educators. My mother was a teacher. She taught in the LA school district for over 30 years. She taught at a middle school, and she also taught at an adult school right in the heart of South Central. And then my dad was a lecturer. You know, he traveled around the world giving lectures on various topics. He had a PhD in naturopathy, so that was one of the main things that he spoke about. But also very deep into history. He traveled extensively throughout Africa, and so those were some of the topics in his lectures and conversations. So just, naturally being around that growing up, I think it rubbed off on me. So, I got into teaching at an early age. I was encouraged to go into that direction. But in terms of me being an author, I think that came as a result of my spiritual development and growth. And doing, just research on my own, trying to understand some of the things that, that I wanted to learn about. And with all that information kind of floating around in my head, I needed a way to kind of organize it. And so setting my thoughts down to paper was one of the ways that I could do that. And, the book, I have a book out, just completed a book, but my book started out as a couple pages essay. And, I shared it with my dad, and, he had some constructive feedback and encouraged me, shared it with my mother and friends and family. And, so, that was a source of encouragement to keep going. So the 5-page little essay that I had turned into a 20-page little pamphlet, and then from a 20-page pamphlet to a 60-page pamphlet, and then from a 60-page pamphlet to about a 75-page perfect bound book. And now, at this stage that I found myself in, is and transformed itself into over 100-page book. So that was, some of the inspirations that I've had in my life. My parents, and just trying to learn about my own spiritual connection with the Most High, and finding a way to document that.
Yes, sir. That's wonderful, man. What I didn't do, and I'm going to do it right now, is to ask you, did you want to add anything to the introduction that I did for you? I said a few things about you. Did you want to say some other things about yourself that, that may be inspiring? Because your resume is excellent, man.
I appreciate that. I think you covered it. Those are some good topics for introduction. Educator, world traveler, and I'm a family man. I've been married to my wife for 14 years.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And, yeah, so I think you covered it.
Okay, well, good. Well, let me move on. All right. Tell me this. In your opinion, what is the importance of history?
Oh, history. History is very important, you know, and history is the jewel of all the things that we could study, because history, you know, kind of lays the groundwork for what we should be doing, not only today, but in the future, as we learn the mistakes of history, or we learn the things that we got right from history. So history is a guide. It's a guide for us. It's a compass for us to know what we should be doing today. So, you know, Malcolm, and I'm sure you may have heard this quote a lot. A lot of people refer to this quote, you know, but Malcolm said history is best prepared to reward our research. So whenever you got problems, all you got to do is study the historical methods used by people all over the world who have had problems similar to yours. And once you know how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. So it's a good way to figure out problems. All we got to do is just identify what our problem is, and then look and see who in history had similar problems and how did they solve it. And then we could use some of those same methods for solving our problems today.
Okay, you know, I want to add something to, you know, when I introduced you, I want you to I want to add a question. Can you tell us some of the places you traveled to, and then tell us some things about that experience?
Okay. Well, you see, I first started traveling when I was 7 years old. My mother, she got a teaching position in Jamaica, teaching English. And she had just recently gotten remarried to my stepdad, who was from Jamaica. So she took me to Jamaica at 7 years old. So that was the first place that I went outside of the United States. And had been going back and forth from the U.S. and Jamaica up until about 11. So that was number one. Number two was Antigua. Went to Antigua because that's where my dad ended up settling. So I went out to visit him around the age of about, I would say, 22. And then after that, that's when I started traveling on my own, you know, internationally to places like Europe, England, Italy, Israel, Egypt. And when I turned 30, there was one place that I knew I needed to be at the age of 30. I knew I needed to be on the African continent. And so I chose Ethiopia. But I lucked up because Ethiopian Airlines at the time was offering a 2-for-1 deal. So if you know, went to one country in Africa, they let you go to another country. So I went to Ethiopia and then got a free ticket, and I went to Ghana. So I visited two countries in Africa, Ethiopia and Ghana, at the age of 30. And then after that, I've been to Mexico. Let's see, I've been to Barbados in the Caribbean. I've been to St. Martin in the Caribbean. I traveled a lot throughout the Caribbean. You know, my heart is there. That's where I grew up a lot, you know, at the age of 7. Those are foundational years, so I kind of feel like it was natural for me to, you know, just continue to explore the Caribbean. So those are some of the places that I've been in my lifetime. Okay,
can you mention something special about Ethiopia?
Ethiopia. Okay. Okay.
What's your connection to Ethiopia?
Well, my wife is from Ethiopia.
There you go.
You know, so yeah, so I've got a real deep connection with Ethiopia. I've been back, to Ethiopia several times. I believe it's been 4 times all together. And I met her there, met her in Ethiopia. She's from a small city in the east part of Ethiopia called Harar, or as how she would say it, Harar, in her accent. But this was the city where Muhammad fled to when he was being persecuted. He was accepted by the king of Ethiopia and protected. And because of that, there's a tradition in Islam that, there's a hands-off policy with regard to Ethiopia. But nonetheless, Harar, where she's from, is an ancient city and has a wall around it. Kind of like how Jerusalem, old Jerusalem is today. There's a wall around the city. And some of the ancient cities, had walls around them. So, that's where she's from. Ethiopia is considered to be Africa's Jerusalem for many people, given some of the ancient landmarks that you have there in Ethiopia. You have rock-hewn churches there that are hundreds of years old that people go and visit and make pilgrimages to. And you have ancient obelisks that are still preserved there from the time of the Queen of Sheba. And I don't know if you know the story of the Queen of Sheba and how she went to go visit King Solomon. So that tradition is there, and it's very significant for a lot of people. Ethiopia is considered to be the cradle of civilization, the birthplace of humanity for many. Depending on what perspective or paradigm that you have, that might be something important. Seeing Lucy there. Ethiopia is one of the sources of the Nile River, believe it or not. A lot of people associate the Nile River with Egypt and don't necessarily associate it with Ethiopia. So Ethiopia has the Blue Nile. It's the source of the Blue Nile, emanating out of Lake Tana in a city called Bahadar. And it's interesting what's going on today in terms of politics with regard to the Nile River. Ethiopia and Egypt are clashing currently because, like Egypt built a dam, Ethiopia wants to build a dam, and so that's causing a little bit of conflict because Egypt is claiming certain rights to water levels there in Egypt. So if you look at the news today, you might see some of that going on.
Man, that's very informative, man. That's good information. I think we in Black Studies class, because I know Professor Amin Ra was both our teachers, and now you starting to teach too, and that's excellent. People could take this information and go do some research, man, and learn some things that they didn't know. I mean, I'm inspired. Yeah, that's excellent, man. Okay, Brother Iweze and I, we've been talking about the state of African people, and I'm a little pessimistic when it comes to us, because I'm hard on myself, so I'm hard on us. And then after interviewing Professor Amin Ra last week on Juneteenth, Amin Ra was more optimistic in his view. So I'm wondering, in your view, what is the state of African people worldwide? When I say African people, I'm saying people of African descent. That means the colored African people.
Right. Well, I would agree with Rod if he had a optimistic view toward the state of African people. I would agree with that. We've come a long way, here in America. So I'll start with the African American experience. We've come a long way from the days of chattel slavery and Jim Crow to being, in key positions in society within the United States. I was reading the article and was looking at the purchasing power of black people here in the United States, and said by 2021, the purchasing power of black people would be around $1.5 trillion, which would put us on par with an economy like Spain. So if we hold that mirror up to ourselves and see, what we look like in comparison to other countries, that would put us at around, maybe perhaps the eighth richest country in the world. But it's not just enough to just say, we got this purchasing power, we got to do something with it. But on the African continent, we've been hearing or seeing the images of, by U.S. white media propaganda throughout the years of our sojourn here in America, of Africa being backward, no roads, it's war-torn, everywhere you go is disease and kids with swollen bellies and flies in the eyes and stuff like that. But while at the same time, they've been going to Africa. They've been going back and forth to Africa, but they got black people scared to death to go and visit. But, today when you go and visit, you'll see high civilization, high levels of development. You'll see all the comforts that you have, that you have here in America. You got all the comforts there too. You visit a country like South Africa, and you can live the same standard of living if that's what a person is into. But Africa is doing great things. We got a lot of power, and in terms of the Caribbean, I think that if we were able to connect ourselves here in America with the Caribbean and with the African continent, we would realize that we are a sleeping giant. All we need to do is come together, and we would be the next world empire on the world scene. So I think that's the state of African people. Now, of course, do we have, issues, black-on-black crime and, things of that sort? We need, but all peoples have issues like that. So I wouldn't be too hard on African people based on some of the little things that we might see going on in our midst with regard to our own people. A lot of it is due to a lack of, here in the United States, the fact that we don't have, leadership to kind of guide us a little better than some of the ways that we have been guided. So so to answer your question, in terms of the state of Black America, people in America, I would say in terms of leadership, there's a leadership gap. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Listening to Democracy Now! Today, I saw Reverend Barber. He's a part of the Reverend Barber, William Barber. He's a guy that's over the Poor People's Campaign. He's like a co-director. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But he's sort of like another guy that reminds me of a Martin King, very sharp and, says a whole bunch of good stuff as far as addressing ideas, addressing the racism, white supremacy paradigm and in direct opposition of it. But he's a little international with his scope, but he really speaks real well and kind of remind me of Martin King. So he may be a person that some African people in the United States can look to and kind of see that we do have people around that are very powerful in their own way to kind of move things further along. So yeah, that's good, man. Good response. Okay, I'm gonna go to something that's kind of like a hobby of yours. Tell me why you listen to that good old reggae music, the roots reggae, and because I listen to it too. I love roots reggae, but why do you listen to it?
Oh man, roots reggae, it speaks to the soul. But probably for me, because there's a lot of different types of music genres that speak to the soul. But for me, like I said, I grew up going to Jamaica, and my stepdad, he was a Rasta, and we lived in the village, surrounded by banana trees and all kind of different fruit, mango trees and chickens and stuff like that. And in the background, and we had a veranda, we had a porch that looked out to the sea. So sitting out there, I would be hearing reggae music constantly. If it was Bob Marley or Gregory Isaacs or Muda Baruka or Yellow Man. Yellow Man was hot at the time when I was out there as a kid. Ika Mouse. Did I mention Ika Mouse?
Ika Mouse.
Ika Mouse. I used to. So there's a proverb that says you teach a kid in their young age what they should know, and when they get older they will not depart from it. So when I became a teenager, I got into rap music and stuff. That was some of my favorite music. But once I turned about 18, I remember my uncle. I was visiting my uncle down in San Diego, and he told me that my mother had a crate that she had left in my great-grandmother's garage as, we were traveling, to Jamaica, and that this crate had been there for years, and that he wanted to give it to me, to restore it back to it, its rightful owners, to me, my mother. So he gives me this crate, and, I looked through it, and it is full of Bob Marley vinyl albums, maybe about 5, 6 different Bob Marley albums. Had some Bunny Wailer up in there. Had Muda Baruka's album Check It up in there. So initially, being into hip hop and, growing up and wanting to be a rapper and stuff like me and my peers, I started listening to the music just for the beats to see what I could sample. But once I start listening, it blew me away, and by the time I was 18 years old, I think I was hooked. I was a Bob Marley fan, so that was my entryway into reggae music, which I think is, the entryway for a lot of people. But once I graduated from Bob Marley, then, of course, I got into the other reggae artists. And then you are responsible for introducing me to a whole bunch of other artists. So I credit you for being a big positive influence with regard to to why I am into reggae music.
Man, I never knew that. Just like you, the summer of 1983, you know, I have a little story on why I'm turned out by reggae music. In 1983, I got Bob Marley's last reggae, work. You know, you call them albums, CDs, cassette tapes. I had a cassette tape. And man, listening to that last one, Confrontation, and that song, Black Man Redemption, man, that album turned me out. You know, I listened to it a whole summer. And I was on my way to Washington State. You know, I played basketball at Washington State and Long Beach State.
Okay.
And man, you talking about taking over my person. That reggae took over my person, and it allowed me to kind of shape the person that I am today, man. It talks about, you know, it's like it's a storybook of how we should be naturally, seem like to me. It's wonderful, but I could talk about that all day. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Okay. What is your view of African male and female relationships?
That's a good question. You know, I think that there's a lot of positive relationships that we may not see because the media, you know, amps up the negative. And so, you know, I haven't done a poll in terms of, you know, trying to figure out the health level of male and female relationships, but just based on my own experience, I think that there's some trends, some troubling trends that I see going on in today's society, not only in America but throughout the world. It seems like there's a weakening of the bond between the male and the female. You know, that there's this homosexual agenda being pushed, and ironically was pushed by a family that seemed like they had it all together, with the presidency of Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama, and the two little girls. But at one point in his presidency, he took a side with a homosexual agenda, which is something that I don't ascribe to, and he tried to push that over on Africa, and said that, you know, and push to make it a human right to be unnatural, to engage in this unnatural behavior. And looking around in the society, I see a lot of young black and even older, you know, just black people moving in those directions. So that, you know, I see that part. But like I was saying at the outset, I have to remain hopeful that there are a lot of black men and women like yourself, you know, like me, who are holding down solid relationships with our spouses, you know, and are compromising where we need to compromise to make you know, to push things forward, and are looking at longevity as opposed to, you know, just short term gain, and being reactionary if things don't go our way one day, then we're quick to get a divorce. But I would hope that